touching on a very, very hot topic, digital transformation. We have PayU presenting, one of our customers. PayU are a payments provider who support merchants in emerging markets such as India, Turkey, South Africa, and Latin America, where, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, there's huge growth and huge interest. A very, very hot topic. I just realized today, I've been in the US nearly a week, and I haven't used an actual dollar, any green at all, since I've been here. It's purely cashless. And you're seeing how that's absolutely taking off in countries such as South Africa, where for multiple reasons, a cashless approach is preferred. So we've got a great tag team here with Marcus Harber and Guy Duncan. Guy is going to kick off talking just more about the business context and the reasons for choosing AppDynamics. And then Marcus is going to go into a little bit more of the technical detail. So please stay on for the second half of the session. We will get to the nitty-gritty if you really want to get that as well. But I think we've got a really good balanced presentation today. So please give a warm welcome to both Marcus and Guy. Should be a great slot today. Thank you.
Hello. Hi. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming to the session. I'm Guy Duncan. I'm the Chief Technical Officer for PayU. We're a global payments business. Basically, we support businesses online. So I'll give you a little bit of business context. We basically, PayU as a business, we've been at it about 14 years. We do about 14 billion of TPV annually. We're focused entirely on the emerging markets, and we basically support about 250 payment methods, which are predominantly in the emerging markets. We're owned by Naspers. Naspers is probably the largest company you've never heard of. They've got about a 70 billion market cap. They were an early investor in WeChat, which is Tencent. And Naspers is 100% focused on emerging markets. So digital businesses, they've got 3 pillars. One of the e-commerce, the payments arm, is the payment arm that PayU supports for the business. This is our geography, highly complex geography. And I think this is a really important context. So we've got about 11 platforms that are in production. And we keep adding new platforms because we have a CEO who likes to buy things, right? Because that's how we like to grow. So we need standardization. And AppDynamics is a big part of that journey to get that standardization through a single pane of glass, standardization in terms of network operations, standardization in terms of the DevOps concepts that we're trying to do. We can't say to the business, no, you can't buy that platform. You can't open up that market. We've got to be able to absorb and deal with that complexity and basically get that market, right? And basically expand. So AppDynamics is a key part of our strategy to enable that. Listen, we optimize the value chain. Payments are payments, PayPal. We all are familiar with those type of online payment processors. There's not a lot of novelty in terms of online payments. What matters is availability. What matters is uptime. What matters is your ability for mean time to resolution. What matters is your mean time to detection. What matters is your ability to convert for the merchant. So if you basically are presenting for a merchant in Russia, right, you've got to have the best conversion rate in that market. So for us, where you're handling millions of transactions on a daily basis, the availability of the platform is absolutely fundamentally important. You need a tool that basically allows you to have that full transparency of that value chain of the transaction. And so we've been able to basically use AppDynamics, use the Business IQ product to basically enable that and provide that bridge back to the business so that they can see that, right? It's been really, really key. And I'll talk a little bit more about where we've done that. We handle about 200,000 companies, a lot of logos that you see, right? We work with global merchants. We work with a lot of local merchants. PayU offering, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think I need to really go too much into this. I think as it relates to AppDynamics, I think that the bottom right corner, right, in terms of security, right, is really, really critically important for us. When you look at correlation of incidents and you look at DevOps concepts, there's this huge intersection that's going on around security as well. And we're correlating, not only are we using AppDynamics to correlate, but we're also using things like Darktrace, machine learning to basically do that as well on top. Because we basically need, in that value chain of that payment process, we need to look at the anomalies. Is there a behavior that's basically anomalistic in terms of a payment flow that could be indicative of a hack, right? So this is really, really important for us because if we have a hack, if the payment instruments are stolen, if that gets leaked, we're out of business. You can't recover from that. So for us to invest in this and also to look at the data and the analytics that we get out of AppDynamics and that transparency, again, that single pane of glass, really, really helps us. It makes me feel a little bit more comfortable about the security and the complexity that we're trying to deal with, and maybe lets me sleep a little bit better at night. Although lately, not so much. I live in Amsterdam, so I haven't really been sleeping that well. Alternative payment methods. I think this is really, really important. So what we see as an industry and as a trend is local alternative payment methods. So what do I mean by an alternative payment method? That could be what they do in Colombia, where basically a huge percentage of the payments online don't go through a credit card. They basically go through a lending option. It's like a pay later product. Like in the US, we've got bill me later. So we see a lot of that. Or it could be like in Poland, where close to 80% of all of the online transactions in the entire country are done by an alternative payment method called a pay-by-link. And a pay-by-link is nothing more than a bank-to-bank direct transfer. In Germany, there's a product called Sofort, which is like that. In Poland, it was one of the first countries to really adopt that. Now, the reason why, you say, okay, why is that? Well, it's a bunch of reasons, but the primary reason is cost. We don't know this. In the US, credit cards are exceptionally expensive, right? You've got take rates, meaning the percentage that you pay as a merchant could be something like 2.5%, 3%, right, of that basket. And so what you have is all over the world, you have all these alternative payment methods that have arisen that challenge traditional credit cards. Now, that's really cool. That's really good for the consumer. It's also good for us because we're super local, and we see that as a moat around our business. But it's also highly problematic from a complexity perspective because we're adding into our platforms all of these new payment methods all of the time, and you have to basically deal with that security concern, and you have to basically be able to visualize it, and you've got to basically look at the SLA and say, hey, this provider is not up, they're not available. In the basket, let me offer an alternative so you can get the conversion for the merchant. So I think alternative payment methods are interesting, and I think that they're going to continue to accelerate, and you're going to see more and more new alternative payment methods emerge in the markets. And I think that will happen also in the US. Payment methods high level. Again, this is kind of just gives a better feel, a more description of that complexity. And when you also, in the context of global merchants, if you're a merchant and let's say you're in the US, but you want to have a platform that will handle transactions for you in South Africa, it could be an origination of a credit card on a cross-border transaction, or it could be a local alternative payment method that you're accessing as that global merchant. Installments are a big trend. We see installments popping up all over. What's interesting about installments is it's really an extension of lending, right? That's where payment service providers like us are going, is basically we're going into the lending world, which is, again, another whole host of complexity associated with how that's managed. And then processing locally, this is really, really critical for us. I mentioned all of those platforms we have. I mentioned all of that complexity we have. We have infrastructure in these local countries. We've got full infrastructure in Russia, in Poland, in Turkey, in India with data centers. We have a data center in South Africa. We're thinking about opening one up in Nigeria. We've got one, basically we serve LATAM all out of rack space, right, in the US. That complexity of those data centers and the standardization of how we run our operations is critically important to us, right? Because what we want to do is we want to basically be able to process locally. The advantage to the merchant of processing locally is much higher conversion rate because of the bank integrations that we have and basically routing that. AppDynamics is a huge enabler for us because when we do things like intelligent routing, meaning when you come through and you basically say, hey, I'd like to play with Visa, we're connected to multiple banks that in that country will resolve Visa. So we can see dynamically through AppDynamics which providers are consistently up. Because you know what? Banks aren't up very often. Banks go down all the time. And it's really problematic. And you've got to basically have the intelligent routing in your system to deal with that. Banks will do things like, you'll call them up and say, hey, you were down last night for 4 hours. And they're like, yeah, we were in maintenance. Yeah, but you didn't tell us. Oh, yeah, we did. We sent you an email. who did you send the email to? You know, it just happens all the time. Banks are very, very resistant to basically, and we want to basically be high availability. We want to have 4 nines of availability. We want to have 0 downtime. We want to have blue-green. That's what we want to have in all of our platforms. We certainly don't have it in all of them, but that's what we aspire to because we want to basically always be available for our merchants. Local fraud management, again, the fraud that happens in Mexico, right, is completely different than the fraud that happens in India. And so we have to basically be able to manage that. And again, AppDynamics, particularly with the IQ product that they have, gives us good insight into that. And actually, I would really like AppDynamics to work with a product like Darktrace to basically offload the data that happens through the payment flow to look at that and push it into some type of machine learning type thing for it to help with fraud. I think that would be really, really interesting. Web responsive checkout, again, we provide that as well. So we provide pages, iframes, et cetera, that basically help serve up the merchants, right, pages. We host it, or it can be done through an API, right, a RESTful API. Integrations, you know, we support a lot of different integrations. Again, AppDynamics lets us see for this particular integration for this merchant, is that connection up? What's the availability? Is there a problem with it? Are they down? Are we not? Can we basically root cause that and figure out what the problem is? Plugins that we support, e-commerce providers. Now I'm going to talk about an implementation that we've done, which is the Polish single platform. A little context about the platform that we have in Poland is we basically went from 0 to full implementation in about 120 days. It's the largest payment platform in Poland. It handles about 60% of all of the e-commerce transactions in Poland. So let me say that again. Our platform handles about 60% of all of the e-commerce online transactions in Poland. We support the largest online merchant in Poland. The company is called Allegro. Think of Allegro as the eBay of Poland, except by market share, they're about 4 times larger. And so robustness for them is really, really critically important. And we basically did this. You know, we basically implemented the solution, and we basically now are able to basically look at all the nodes. You can see the stats there. We've got 188 nodes, 41 tiers, and then implementation. And just a little call out, got some colleagues from Poland here, so thanks you guys for the AppDynamics implementation. Gives us something nice to talk about. Thanks for being here. We have, you know, in Poland, we've got pieces of the platform that are legacy, right? And I like to say classic, very much like a classic car, right? Things like, you know, multicast still running, things like RMI still running, right? And basically, we need to basically make sure that we've got the ability to basically manage that. We're moving to things like Kafka. We're moving to basically microservices off that architecture. And Marcus is going to talk in a lot more detail architecturally for the geeks in the room about what we're actually doing in terms of that blueprint. But my point is that AppDynamics is a product that lets us straddle that entire world, right? So we have, again, that single pane of glass into that environment. It lets us manage the legacy, section that, and see that we can put pieces of that into a sunset grid, sunset that appropriately, focus on the new technology that we want to introduce, and we can do that in a much more controlled, intelligent manner with hardcore metrics, right? So we can actually look at a component, or we can look at a particular flow, and we can say with this legacy component, we can see the number of transactions that that's being supported by, and we can then respond to that with analytics about how we need to treat that in the portfolio, as opposed to simply saying, okay, we got to get rid of this. What does that mean you need to get rid of it? AppDynamics lets us drill into that. When we introduce those new services, we're able then to attack very specific use cases. So like we're working on a balanced migration project for Allegro right now, but we're able to do that in a very orchestrated way, and then within those flows, we're able to quarantine that. AppDynamics lets us see that and orchestrate that in a much more controlled fashion, as opposed to experimentation or guessing. Challenges, right? I've already talked about a lot of these. Many different entry points to monitor different types of customers. Again, we support thousands and thousands of merchants in Poland. We support over 25, 30 different bank integrations, right? It's a complex ecosystem. Plus, additionally, on top of that, on our payment platform, we support 200,000 sellers that are basically selling on Allegro on that platform as well. So additionally, the complexity around regulatory, again, we're in a regulated market, And there are times where we will get a call from a regulator and they'll say, hey, we heard that you were out. You were not available. You couldn't handle these these transactions. There was some type of problem. We're able to go into AppDynamics. We're able to look at the solution. 9 out of 10 times it's not us. It's typically a bank that was down and basically didn't tell the regulator. And again, right now we have a biweekly release cycle. We're trying to move that to a daily release cycle. And again, AppDynamics, in that release cycle, it gives us key information that lets us roll back, lets us see exactly what works, what doesn't, and it lets us go and adopt DevOps concepts much more quickly on the teams, run by the teams running it. So that everyone in Poland, all of the Scrum teams we have basically work and run AppDynamics. And then for us, we'll probably do about, Zip will probably do about 35% of our total volume in Christmas, right? Yeah, about 35% of our total volume. That will be compressed in about a 3-week period of time. So the overall traffic on our platform will quadruple, right, in terms of peak load. And again, AppDynamics is a key tool enable for us to keep that platform up and available. Legacy monitoring stack. I think we probably all know this, right? It's funny that I put Splunk on here, but really I consider Splunk as legacy. Legacy primarily not because I don't like the technology. I love the technology. It just is very expensive. So we're looking at basically moving some other things. Dynatrace, we did a bake-off with AppDynamics and Dynatrace. Although Zip gives me grief all the time that I wasn't objective about it because I've worked with AppDynamics before. I did one of the largest installations in Europe with a real money gaming operator. And so I had a definite bias for the product. But again, we really felt that it was better than Dynatrace in terms of what we were getting and also in terms of the value that we were getting. And then I guess am I pretty much done, right? Okay. So again, I think I've talked and addressed why we basically use this, and we're in the process of rolling this out globally. So we've been very, very active in rolling it out in India. We're pushing it into our platform that runs in Russia, Turkey, and Romania. And then also we've got a big push in South Africa as well to get it live. And then next calendar quarter, we'll be pushing it into LATAM. So with that being said, 2 more slides? Okay. There's our adoption. Actually, I think it's gone up quite a bit more since then. And then what's next? I think we've talked about that. Oh, automate. You know, we really live automate or die, right? That's a really, really an effective mantra. We really, really try to push hard on that. Marcus is going to talk about that a little bit more. So let me introduce Marcus. Marcus is our chief infrastructure architect based in Berlin. He's Austrian, so don't call him a German. He'll get really mad. And he's going to take you through more of a deep dive, and then we've got 10 minutes for question and answer. So with that being said, here's the clicker. Cool. Thanks, Marcus.
Hello, everyone. So what I want to walk you through is now about a rather young product called Global Wallet. It's not just a product. It's not just a project. It's actually a way we want to set up a blueprint for the organization, how we would like to emphasize driving CI/CD automation and DevOps concepts. So let's quickly dive into it. Initially, the product was called Global Wallet. Certain people on the top said, yeah, it's not so catchy. We're going to go with CCP, so Core Consumer Platform in the future. Let me quickly touch the topic team. So as I said, it's a rather young team, and young, I mean not only just the age, but probably over the last 6 months, we hired 7 engineers. I want to be specific, engineers and not developers, because for me that's a major difference. Not to insult the developers now, but engineering is also an art, so to say, for us. So they bring the right mindset. They do end-to-end. They develop. They come up with the concept. They maintain. They operate. They patch. And what's also very important is they destroy. So they have to remove resources in an automated fashion, and it often sounds easy if you say, yeah, scale up, scale down, scale up, scale down. Often you forget about resources, and because we are run out of the cloud, it's costly. So it's really, really, really expensive. Along with this team of the engineers, we have a small team of hands-on and coding architects. I'm part of this. And alongside this is the product team. We adopted the LESS framework. So as you can see, we have product owner, area product owner, and an agile coach, aka Scrum Master, running the show on a daily basis. Every team, every product requires a vision, right? You need a purpose why you get up at 3 a.m. getting called for something that broke because you potentially didn't consider it and automating the testing. So what is the vision for us? Basically, Global Wallet started to be a global fintech platform for all the PayU entities, providing all sorts of payment services. As an example, escrow consumer credits and all the things that Guy already touched, so I will not go into the details. It's more important to mention that we think global and go local. So the Global Wallet is considered as a global API, but wherever we have to go into the markets due to privacy laws, regulations, compliance, restrictions, whatever, we have to go local. So it's really important to understand that we always think global. Keynotes today, we talked about it, flexibility and speed. So that's ultimate key. You want to drive changes as quickly as possible, and you can only do that in an automated fashion. If you fail to automate, you will ultimately completely screw your uptime. So that's why it's really important to keep to these things. Adaption rate, key. How are we going to achieve this? So we are basically API first, and then we do mobile and front end, but at the current state of the product, it's API first. So we have various different APIs, and this is where AppDynamics comes in really handy. Define your business transaction. Let's say you auto-discover a lot of those as they come along, and the API approach for us is the right way. So once you have your solid APIs, you can put on top whatever you want. You can do front ends, you can do mobile, you name it. I talked a little bit about automation. So for us, every single change and every single commit basically goes through a CI/CD pipeline. So everything is fully automated, regardless of a configuration change for, I don't know, an NTP server, or you fix something, or you roll out a new feature or whatever. Everything runs through the CI/CD pipeline. I will touch the details a little later, so let me go over this a little bit more quickly. And everything is served out of our basic, we call it CI/CD platform as a service. It's an internal service that came up, or that came out of this product team, and we call it MGT. It's our central build and deploy platform run out of Europe. Basically, everything is run out of Rackspace UK at the moment, besides the local country-specific topics. And security, Guy touched it. We are in the lucky position with the Global Wallet team to stay out of PCI scope, because we are partnering with a company called Irdeto. And what they do is they provide us PCI as a service, various endpoints, really interesting technology. So compared to the Polish platform, that's a really tiny architecture, right? It's just 2 services. But as I said, the focus while setting up the team was set up the team properly. Create the foundation for your factory. Once you have the factory, you can speed up the conveyor belt, and you can pump out microservices as you wish. But first, you need to set the stage. Otherwise, you will fail after the 3rd, 4th, 5th service, and you run everything out of a 7 engineers team. So scalability is key. As you can see, we are running at the moment in the production environment roughly 500,000 of the API calls. Everything is below 70 milliseconds, and the error rate is pretty stunning, to be honest, almost 0. So nice code. Let's touch a little bit more logical overview. How do we deploy, and how does this platform, this CI/CD path fit into the picture? So we have basically the approach of going with 80% of the global features that are demanded by our merchants and customers. That's what we consider the core, out of the UK Rackspace deployments, and everything that is country-specific, can be Poland, can be Russia, can be Latin America, whatever, is then deployed and maintained by the teams, the entities that are actually local. And they just interface over the API, and that's basically it. All the deployments, as I said, are run through the management platform. Now we get a little bit more on the details when it comes to the technical layer. So the vertical slice, how are we deploying and why are we using certain technologies? So we took a decision to abstract on OpenStack. So our infrastructure abstraction is the OpenStack API. And because our engineers love to have stuff on their notebook, can walk around, so we have to reproduce the whole environment locally, out of Vagrant. So that's the reason why we have maybe too many software load balancers, as you can see, as necessary. So we run our AJ proxy for our software load balancing behind the actual physical load balancer. So it might sound strange to you, but it keeps the top layer static, and the rest is highly dynamic. The backend language, simple plain Java. You could argue outdated, but it's rock solid, it's scalable, and everything is stateless, and that's a really important thing. Keep your components stateless. Data belongs to the database, logic in the application. So we do everything based on the Docker ecosystem. Everything is containerized, every environment, regardless of local, dev, test, stage, prod. We stick to the vanilla frameworks, no customization whatsoever, because as I said, the team is young, they need to learn, and the core capability is Java development for features, plus certain other aspects and perks. For the CI/CD part, we recently moved the CI part out of Jenkins actually into GitLab, and some parts of the CD is still with Jenkins. Provisioning and creation of resources done out of Ansible. I heard some voices within the team, they want to move towards Terraform, so that's very likely the next change when it comes to creation of resources. Fabio is an eBay-based software load balancing GitHub project. We use that one for canary testing for our blue-green deployments. So I don't know how many people attended a session earlier when someone was explaining the blue-green deployment. I don't want to go into the details, but I assume everyone knows the basics. So that's the slice. And now let me tell you a story in a slightly different format.
Look at time. You got 12 minutes. So.
All right, I'm good. DevOps how-to. I try to avoid the DevOps too often because then it becomes a drinking game. So because it's a team, right, you want to have a contract in place. First thing is you need to have roles and responsibilities so that every member knows internal responsibilities and everyone from the outside knows whom to talk to. The team needs a definition of done. Every team has their choice how to define this, but in our way it's including automation, it includes testing, automated testing, it includes monitoring, and AppDynamics is part of this monitoring. The current defined support process is based on Jira, probably not any longer. We have something up the pipe. And also you have to have a defined communication channel. In our case, it's a Slack team. So the big question is then again, why? Why are you doing these things? And this is really important to every single member in the team. Like a vision, you need a purpose. So why are we going to do this? First of all, it's not only the Berlin-based team that is contributing code. Anyone can contribute. It's like an internal open source project that we are running. We have a lot of different languages because we are on multiple geolocations, and of course different team cultures. So AppDynamics is really great in unifying this language. For us, it's technology. So everyone sees the same pane of glass, sees the same incident, sees the same event that happened and potentially broke something or improved something. It's not always negative. And we can do that via a single, well, not a single, at least a common SaaS dashboard. So maybe something to highlight here. The Global Wallet project runs not on-prem. We run SaaS on a dedicated controller. So we like SaaS service wherever we can because, again, 7 people, you can only stretch so far. All right, second pillar for us is then the API contract. So how to interface the technical aspect of the team. First of all, you need to define a protocol. API, RESTful, of course, HTTPS, HTTPS2. You also need to have a defined response. So I'm not talking about plain HTTP response codes, but I'm talking about the documentation. So recent decision of the team was to go with apiary. And we're also running our tests before we roll out against the documentation. So first we document the API, then we run the tests against it, and then we verify if everything's working. Versioning is key. So we don't do rollbacks, pardon me. So versioning is really important. You need to keep this tight and strict. And we are striving for 4 nines availability. When I'm talking about all those contracts and principles doesn't necessarily mean that everything is in place as of now. So its team is growing, by the way, hiring. Someone wants to join us. But this is something we would like to live up to. Why would we do this? So first of all, you need to be predictable. Predictable in sense of your product owner asks for estimations, as an example. And if the team doesn't have the confidence, they are not predictable. Same for actual customer predictability. So they want to know what's changing, where is it documented, and that's the reason why we do this. By defining a protocol, in our case, it prevents potential proprietary interface implementation. No one is going to block or stop, so to say, but we want to try this. And also it prevents our artificial dependencies within the organization so that we don't do RMI implementation. We just interface our HTTP and HTTPS. AppDynamics is really great in supporting us in giving us a real-time overview. So whenever we do changes, we add services, we spin up new containers, it's reflected in real time. It's almost real time, it's just slightly delayed. And what's really key to the engineers is they see performance increases or decreases almost in real time after they did a rollout. So as I said, it's rollout into all the environments, except Vagrant. The local environment doesn't make sense to do in a SaaS fashion, so why? Just waste of money. Okay, so team principles. It's also quite important to us. So actually, the team owns the product. Okay, I will emphasize a little bit later on what we define as product, but basically everything is done by the team. So there are no excuses and no exceptions. We aim for frequent zero downtime releases. So by frequent, you will ask, what's your number? I would say 100, 200 changes a week on an average basis. And again, a release for us is a change, and the change can be any kind of commit. So Docker ecosystem, talked about it already. Everything is done in Swarm. No extra plugins, no extra customization. We want to keep it simple. It's hard enough. All the tasks are done by the team. So it's not just dev and ops. We combine it all together anyhow. The engineers do all the work, and they also do infrastructure. So I'll touch on that topic later. Really key is never, never, ever stop learning. Okay, that's critical. And embrace failure. We try to live fail culture. So if something breaks, people analyze it, they fix it, they document it, and afterwards they propagate it, they talk about it. So we actually embrace this. What is the product? So feature plus technology is our definition of product. So the product owner implicitly is forced into this. And he has to understand that he's running more than just a set of features. So when it comes to prioritization, the team has a saying, okay? The team can go and define what is important for the product. The PO is basically then the person that signs off those things. The main reason is, again, we want to keep a high frequency of those changes. The main requirement is if you want to innovate, it requires independence and flexibility. So that's key for us, again. The significant improved mean time to detect and MTTR for the repair for the DevOps teams is also really important. Give me just a sip of water for a second.
This is yours.
Too late. Too late. It's gone. Exactly. And AppDynamics gives us a really nice portfolio of supported protocols that are out of the box and they are matching with our stack. So it was obvious to go for AppDynamics for us. Okay, we're coming close. So now, actually, where I have my strong suit, the infrastructure. Let's see. everything, also in the infrastructure area, needs to run through the end-to-end pipeline. So if you do any kind of changes on your, I don't know, local firewall as an example, or you want to do open SSH, open VPN, any kind of those changes, they are part of it. They're part of the product, they're part of the stack. Therefore, they have to be taken care of the same way as you would touch a feature. So again, we deploy infrastructure as code. OpenStack is our API, and everything is underneath abstracted. It's a shell. So we can deploy it anywhere, wherever we have an API, regardless of an F5 load balancer change, add something to the pool, remove machines, add cloud block storage, you name it. Everything is done as part of the code. Software-defined network, most people know this cabling mess. I will not touch this. It's a messy topic. And we also live to this concept of no single point of failure. So whenever we come up with something new, this is also on our checklist, so to say. So if I also release or deploy, am I actually doing it in the right sequence? Okay. If you do blue-green deployment, is it, again, proper timing? Is the testing done? Otherwise, you can come from a really solid architecture to an offline application within an instant. So this really needs to be tested and is important to us. By going with OpenStack, we are in the position at the moment to be vendor agnostic. So as long as an API is present to us, we will use that one. And we can very likely also go to AWS or Azure or whatever within a short period of time. So again, it supports our high frequency of changes. It's key for us. And we live to the principles of Phoenix infrastructure. What is Phoenix infrastructure, you would potentially ask? So we don't change components. They are disposable objects for us. And a container or a VM will simply tear down for every change we do, and we recreate it. So that's what we call basically the Phoenix infrastructure. Of course, we do blue-green deployments all the time, regardless of the size of the change. AppDynamics gives us a really nice constant insight by the events. So whoever worked with this in this room already saw this tiny blue exclamation mark with events. You will see the changes. Everything is tracked in there. So it can sort of also work as a change management tool for you, at least as an addition, I would say. And of course, the agents are super easy to deploy. All right, so let's go for the last topic. I'm pretty good in time. So, development principles. Of course, the engineers do develop. So as I said, first you want to create your foundation. You want to create your factory. And then you can go with a high speed, high frequency of changes in your continuous deployment. We only roll forward. So by versioning and everything, and also rolling out database changes in an automated fashion, we never roll back. So if something comes up, we fix it, we roll forward. Blue-green canary testing supports you in this. Automated testing is key, is required. Microservices. You saw in the initial dashboard for the global wallet just 2 services. It's like, easy architecture, of course. But we want to prevent a multi-tiered, monolithic architecture. So we want to focus on specialized services, slice it out, and minimize the change, because the smaller the change, the smaller the impact. Okay? Also, we want to stay under 100 milliseconds internal average response time. As you've seen, it's roughly around 66 at the moment in a hybrid environment, so we have some latency in there. And it's really important also to measure and constantly monitor this, because it's basically money. So the slower your API gets, the more money you lose. And feature toggles is also something that supports our forward thinking. So if sometimes features are prioritized but rolled out later, or let's say used later, we can roll them out easily in time, check them up front, turn them off whenever they need it, and that's really nice. Everything sounds too simple, right? You usually keep it simple, but it's really hard to keep stuff simple. And you have to run tests, and you have to create and recreate all the environments so often. It's painful, but it's worth it. All right, the final one. So we want to ensure the high code quality, also reduce code reviews. We do peer programming, but we want to really reduce the review time. Also, it gives us a nice, easier way to collaborate within the team, within the corporation. And AppDynamics, again, supports us in the performance metrics, real-time analysis on method level, and the code performance training. So whenever we change something, we have a release comparison, so to say. You probably know this feature as well. And that's it.
Yeah, one thing that I want to mention is about the hardware agnostic or cloud agnostic approach. So when we started from an architecture perspective, the easy thing to have done would have been run right to AWS, right, and consume all that wonderful crack cocaine from AWS, right, that gets you going in that infrastructure. We really resisted that. It took much longer, right, but it really pays off. And the reason why we did that, not because we wanted to, we did that because it's the markets that we live in. We have to be able to deploy our infrastructure in Russia. AWS doesn't run in Russia. AWS doesn't run in South Africa, or AWS doesn't run in Turkey. So we had to take that approach. And what we wanted was we wanted to be able to have cloud wherever we could using OpenStack kind of infrastructure. And by the way, AWS supports that, and then using Docker containers. So that was a really, really important architectural consideration. And that forced us up, it forced our game up in terms of industrialization and standardization. So people always talk about agility, and they talk about agile and Scrum. But at the same time, we've injected a bunch of Six Sigma concepts in terms of our industrialization and standardization. And I think that that's also really important. Sometimes you can't go really fast until you standardize and you reduce those snowflakes that are running in production. And AppDynamics is a key enabler for us to basically find the snowflakes and get rid of them, right? So we can standardize. Okay, with that being said, we've got 10 minutes for Q&A, or 7 minutes for Q&A. Yeah. Can we get a mic for Q&A? Yeah. Sorry to.
Sorry, I'm losing my voice as well. You said you automate everything you can. I wondered if you'd had any experience with the automation of AppDynamics, not the sort of setup, but things like the health checks, the alerts, custom configurations. Like, how is the API? I've not used it. Can you automate? If you wanted to recreate your live AppDynamics, could you do that in an automated fashion, or?
Yes and no, I would say.
Okay.
We have direct access to some tooling because at the moment the API doesn't give us all the capabilities we would require to do this. So there is a nice export-import tool.
Okay.
And that's what we can automate, yes.
So you set it up in the UI, you export it, and then you kind of use it as a...
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
It would be nice if AppDynamics had a kind of more of a mature concept around cookbooks,
Yep.
like what you would see with Ansible.
Yeah.
That you could just go, and if you're a customer, you could just see all these different cookbooks.
Yep.
And just grab the one that you wanted and just use it. I think that would be cool. And you could do that for payment verticals, like for payments, or you could do it for e-commerce, or you could do it by domains. I think that would be a really, really nice feature for AppDynamics.
Thanks.
Great question, though.
Any more questions?
Yep, we got one back
in the
there.
back.
Great, going to keep me fit.
Yeah. Got a sprint.
Yeah. Up. Velocity. Oh, okay, go for it.
Okay, let's try it again.
There we go.
So what I was asking was, as diverse as your environment is, right, across all these different areas of the company, countries, and so on, one of the hardest things is to get people to buy in a vision and a direction in order to do this. And one of the things I would ask is, where did that vision come from? And then how did you get buy-in across the organization in order to drive down that path, right? And are you there yet, or are you still on your way?
So we're still on our way, right? I mean, we're still in the process of rolling it out. I think I had the benefit of that I had done a very large, significant AppDynamics installation at a previous job. Marcus and I previously worked for the largest online sports betting, real money gambling provider in the world called BWin Party. And we did an installation, I think, with 26,000 endpoints using AppDynamics. And so when I came into PayU and I looked at the ecosystem, I had that perspective that I knew that AppDynamics could help. So one, I had a reference, and I knew that it could help. So that gave me confidence. The second thing was that I was able to sell the business on it. When we negotiated the contract, we didn't even have the business intelligence product. That allowed us to basically say, hey, we can get higher availability, we can get quicker mean time to resolution, mean time to detection, and we can have a better insight into our production capabilities so we can work on SLAs. So in Poland, it was all around what we developed a thing called the Fire Report, which was basically our lean engineering, the whole process chain of payment flows. And we started basically pushing metrics around those and daily transparency. And we used that to basically attach SLAs to that. So we could start seeing, for this payment method, this bank, this is the availability. And we started then having a discussion with the business that was data-driven, as opposed to what do you think you want. So when we implemented a portfolio board for managing the product and the tech, we were able to say, bring your data to the table, otherwise we won't approve anything. And we were able to demand business cases. And they would say, well, how do I get a business case? And we'd say, well, we'll use AppDynamics to get the data. And we'll look at that, and we'll see, okay, how will that help conversion? How will that help? And then that was the turning point, right, in terms of changing that culture. We're still a long ways to go. I mean, the CTO for India is here, so he could tell us about the implementation and rollout of that. So that's under process. The guys from South Africa are here. That's undergoing. And then next year, we're going to do LATAM. So, but I think it's very easy to get going. And once you can get that dialogue around data with the business, particularly with the Analytics IO product, I think it can really, really make a big difference.
Okay. I think we've got time just for one more question.
Yep. We got one down here. Either one. Flip a coin. Wrestle for it.
We can take any more questions up one-to-one straight afterwards, but we've got a bit of a tight schedule today. Sorry. There you go. Come through.
I have a question about Fabio and the Canary builds, and how do you use it, and how do you measure success when you promote something new to your infrastructure?
I think we don't have enough time to go into the details. And by the way, it looks like the team is fading Fabio out. So last week they were discussing stuff about Linkerd or maybe just using AHA proxy. So yeah, you can use the traditional canary testing with waiting. So you come in with a new version, you wait over X% of your traffic, and from the external and from the internal, you validate if your changes are good. So AppDynamics can do this for you as well, okay? So you see is an increased error rate or not, is the latency going up or not. So these are actually then our measurement points and toolings.
Thanks very much. Folks, could you give just a warm hand of applause, I think, just for a great presentation from both of them. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks.